I am in London, England, at the infamous Tower of London. I will be going inside to explore the fascinating and sometimes dark stories of this place, along with its various exhibits and incredible artifacts. This tour will be split into two separate videos, as this is a massive fortification and there's a lot to cover. The Tower of London is one of the most important castles in world history, probably the most significant and well known in England, and it has a very long and dense history. The tower complex takes up about 12 acres alongside the River Thames. Sections have been rebuilt and expanded several times since it was first established almost 1,000 years ago. The tower was founded by William the Conqueror, the new Norman king who entered into London after his victory at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, which essentially gave him reign over England. From there, the English monarchs have continued to add upon the tower, some have lived here, and eventually this place expanded into many other functions. I think it goes without saying that the Tower of London is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This is the Traitor's Gate. The former entrance used to transport Tudor-era prisoners. These mortars were used by the Venetians. This is the East Gate. This is the one that a lot of weapons were transferred in and out of. Now I am going to enter the Tower of London. There are lots of 18th century cannons outside. This was the site of the ancient Roman riverside wall. The tower did originally envelop some of the Roman walls of Londinium. An elephant was sent by King Louis IX of France to King Henry III back in 1255, and the elephant lived right in there at the tower. This cannon was cast by the Ottomans in the 1850s and was intended for a Turkish expedition to India to rid of the Portuguese. The tower is home to a group of celebrity ravens, and here's their enclosure. There is a long-time legend that there always must be at least 6 ravens at the tower, or the tower and kingdom will fall. And at least 6 ravens have been here ever since, so the kingdom has not fallen. Currently, there are 9 of them. This massive fortress gun was captured by the British from a fort guarding Canton, China, during the Second China War. A number of architectural styles mix here at the tower. The crown jewel of the Tower of London, besides maybe the crown jewels, is the White Tower at the center. This is the original Tower of London, built by William the Conqueror in the year 1078. So this building is nearly 1,000 years old. That is absolutely incredible. Next to it are the remains of the 12th century Wardrobe Tower, built by King Richard I. It stored some valuables for the royal family. And this is a remainder of the ancient Roman city wall that protected the city of Londinium. Back 900 years ago, the White Tower was the main castle of London, so it was used for military defense and by the king to live in and have meetings. Then it was also used as a prison starting in the 1100s. The tower's role diminished by the 1300s. For a long time it was mainly used for storage of arms and munitions, along with the occasional imprisonment. For example, Richard II was jailed and abdicated his throne here in 1399. This is the Two Princes Staircase. The future King Richard III took his 2 nephews, brothers Edward V, who was directly in line for the throne, and Richard Duke of York into custody after their father died in 1483. He had them imprisoned in the Bloody Tower, and likely had them murdered to secure his path to the throne, as they were never seen again. During a renovation nearly 200 years later, The skeletons of 2 children were found tucked away at this entrance to the staircase. They were very likely the 2 princes, though the Church of England has never allowed the bodies to be examined. This old Norman fortress also happens to be one of the world's first tourist attractions. It's been open to paying visitors in some capacity since the 1600s. Many famous people visited back then, like Phyllis Wheatley, an 18th century African American poet from Massachusetts. Here's some authentic 1500s man and horse armor. It's been displayed in here for a long time, and the armor used to be worn by a mannequin that stood next to the mounted figure of Henry VII. All of these giant wooden horses were displayed as part of the former line of kings in here. A lot of the horses were mounted by wood-carved figures of select warrior kings wearing their authentic armor. Or usually it was someone else's armor, but guidebooks never lie, right? Now that attraction was definitely more for spectacle than accurate information, so a lot of the info was exaggerated, and there was a lot of mismatching of the artifacts. These were the breech loading guns of Henry VIII. He was very active and participated in the shooting of longbows and firearms like these. Special ranges were built for him to practice at Windsor Castle. This is the armor of King Henry VIII. Oh my gosh, that is so awesome. The armor was highly decorated with engravings and silvering, definitely fit for a king. This was one of the first pieces displayed as part of the line of kings, though during the 1700s the armor was actually displayed on Henry VII, only to be corrected in the 1820s. This is the 1540s field and tournament armor of King Henry VIII. It had interchangeable parts that could be switched out to give him advantages in tournaments, and he also would have worn this on the battlefield. He went to war with France in 1543, so he may have worn this at Boulogne. Surrounding the suit are the extra interchangeable pieces for the armor set, like reinforced tilts for jousting tournaments, and extra pieces for protection that could be worn under the breastplate. That is fascinating. This is another 1540 armor set of Henry VIII. In the line of kings, a wood-carved figure of Henry wore this armor on a horse. It was displayed like that since 1660. I kinda wish they still did it like that. There is a wall covered by antique breastplates and some more armor suits. This is the little armor set of a young Henry Stuart, Prince of Wales. It was made in 1607 and has scenes of Alexander the Great painted on it. This is the gilt armor of Charles I. This armor was also displayed on a figure of Charles I in the line of kings since 1660. Here are some more of the original wooden horses from the line of kings. Most of them were created in the late 1680s. I do really appreciate the curation here, how they lean into the history of this place as a tourist attraction, with emphasis on how the line of kings pieces were displayed. Here are some wooden hands and heads of the king figures that were made in the 1680s. I don't think any of the whole figures survived, unfortunately. The line of kings was originally established as a propaganda effort for the monarchy after the restoration by Charles II. This was advertised as William the Conqueror's armor. Unfortunately, it is not. None of his armor survived. This was the saddle of the horse that William III's figure sat upon. Very few of these original saddles survived. The horses were finely decorated. This is the armor of James II, mounted atop a carved horse. Because he abdicated, James II was originally not included in the line of kings. There is so much armor. This exhibit is amazing. This was the armor of Count Annibale Capitalista. He was the commander of a mercenary army for the Venetian Republic during the 1600s. Here's some Maximilian armor alongside some horses. This is French cuirassier armor from the 17th century. This fancy helmet is North Italian. It was probably made around 1470. This case contains the armor of young Charles I and Charles II. The opulent Dutch armor was made for the future kings in the early 1600s. This is a Spanish collar of torment, but early guidebooks said this was to put around the necks of scolding wives here in England. Here's a gigantic suit of armor set up next to a tiny suit. This is known as the Giant and the Dwarf. The largest and smallest suits of armor in the collection have been displayed side by side for a long time. The big armor was originally advertised as that of John of Gaunt, but it turned out he predated the armor. And this teeny suit of armor was either made for little Charles I or for the court dwarf Geoffrey Hudson. That's a pikeman's armor set. This is an antique plaster model of knights in combat. It depicts the death of Thomas, the Duke of Clarence, at the Battle of Beaugay in 1421. And here's another look at Henry VIII's armor. The displays continue on the next floor. This is the Lumley Horseman, which was made in 1580, displayed just like the kings were in the line of kings. Here are some relics from India, acquired by the East India Company, like a decorated helmet and dagger. They display more of their priceless artifacts while providing context on the history of the collection here at the tower, which is a great way to do it. On the left is a 16th century Italian helmet, next to it a double-barreled wheel-lock pistol, and a partisan from the city of Lyon, France. Here's some more classic armor that was collected by two private individuals who were inspired by the tower's museum. Eventually their arms and armor collections ended up here as well. A lot of this armor is German made from the Holy Roman Empire. These are some artifacts that were dug up in the River Thames right by the tower. A lot of deadly weapons ended up falling into the river. There are also some artistic firearms, like the Tiffany revolver. This one appears to be based off of R2-D2. This is a World War I memorial plaque for the men who worked here, but went off to serve in the Great War. These are the remains of a small chamber gun. And this is a bronze breech-loading 3-barrel gun from 1535. These are all from the collection of American newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst. Even though he built his own castle in California, he restored a historic castle in Wales and put his armor collection in there. Again, this structure was a medieval arsenal for the most state-of-the-art military supplies of the day. This is so awesome. A grouping of staff weapons. These are from the time of Henry VIII. Here is some more royal arms and armor, including a jousting lance. That is some authentic armor of Henry VIII's horse. Here's some Stuart era armor. As mentioned, Charles II was the one who started displaying stuff for visitors. That is the wooden head of Queen Elizabeth I. She was displayed here in the line of kings. These are the king's swords, including those of George I, George II, George III, George IV, William IV, Edward VII, George V, and this was the sword of George VI, who I think was a pretty great king. As an American, not a big fan of George III, but that's his sword, which is neat to see. This saddle was a gift from Sigismund, the King of Hungary and Holy Roman Emperor. He gave it to Henry V in 1416. And this is authentic Japanese shogun armor, presented to James I in 1613, part of a gift to mark the first ever trade agreement between Japan and Britain. There are so many cool weapons here. We have now entered the Chapel of St. John, a little Romanesque chapel within the White Tower. This is an original feature. It was built for William the Conqueror, but he died before it was completed. Now I'm heading up a small spiral staircase to explore more of the White Tower. Oh my gosh, that is awesome. There's a freaking dragon up here. The dragon is made up of a variety of armor and weapon parts. This is marvelous. I like how the claws are revolvers. The Board of Ordnance was based at the tower. They were in charge of maintaining forts and supplies for the Army and Navy. The Constable of the tower has been responsible for all tower operations. This is the death mask of Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington who defeated Napoleon at Waterloo and was a tower constable. The Royal Mint was also based at the tower for a long time. This is a bronze falcon cannon, probably Flemish from about 1520. Here are some examples of guns that would be stored here by the thousands. That is a 1680s matchlock organ gun, a multi-barrel gun that could be shot in a volley. That's interesting. This is a model of the Grand Storehouse. It was the largest building at the tower, but it was destroyed by a fire in 1841. A lot of important artifacts were lost with it. This is the Executioner's Axe, alongside the execution block that was used here at the tower for the execution of prisoners. It's unknown how many heads this specific axe chopped, but there were probably some famous figures beheaded by it. It was last used in 1747 to execute the Scottish Baron Simon Fraser of Lovat, who fought Hanoverian forces but had to surrender. He was imprisoned here and executed for treason. But his execution was kind of disastrous, as the stand collapsed and killed 9 spectators. That is a fake executioner's mask, but Victorian visitors were told it was the real thing. There were executions here into the 20th century. The last one was German spy Joseph Jacobs, who parachuted into England in 1941, but he was injured and captured. He was executed by firing squad here at the tower on August 14th, 1941. That is the chair he was seated in when he was shot to death. There's definitely some bullet damage on it. Not sure why, but there's a lot of coins and other things down there. Here's a model of the tower that lights up. There are some artifacts excavated around the tower, and it shows where they were located. Let's see where these cavalry sword blades were found. Here's a fire-damaged gun from the Grand Storehouse. It was located right there. This breastplate was hit by a cannonball. Whoever was wearing this probably didn't survive that. There are some other interactive displays in here. This is definitely one of the best places I've ever been. In the lower level, there are tons of cannons and mortars. These are some bronze 12-pounders from the Napoleonic Wars. That's a very old mortar. There's also a lot of rifles and even spears in here. Some of these cannons and mortars are very intricate. The designs on them are great. These cannons definitely got some damage. In 1974, a bomb was placed down here. It killed 1 person and injured 35 others. Here's a display on some of the tower curiosities. which the early guidebooks really emphasized. Many of these are unusual war trophies, like this gilded statue of a winged lion. The bell was captured during the Crimean War. These are French staff weapons that were captured during the Napoleonic Wars. This miniature model of the Tower of London was made in 1842, just after the Grand Storehouse fire. It shows some buildings that are no longer here. That's a lead cistern, part of the tower's firefighting system. And this bronze 13-inch mortar was also captured during the Napoleonic Wars. Well, I am beyond impressed with the White Tower. Behind the White Tower is the Jewel House. This is the structure that houses the crown jewels. Some of Britain's most valuable treasures and gemstones are housed in there. Of course, they are owned by the royal family, but commoners have been able to pay to see them here for centuries. Now, for some reason, they don't allow photography inside there. The crown jewels are all known and publicized, so I don't see the harm in taking photos, but they don't, so I'm going to continue on to the rest of the tower. I would have gone in because I would like to see them, but I ran out of time by the end of the day. Some Queen's Guards are stationed outside the Jewel House. I caught a changing of the guards.
Outside agree!
So there is a lot more to see here at the Tower of London. Continue to part 2 to see the other historic buildings and displays, like the Bloody Tower. It is linked in this video's description. Thanks for watching.